Plus.
Today is a very important vote.
Thousands of nurses are casting ballots in Minnesota, but it has nothing to do with an election and everything to do with what could be the largest nurses' strike in U.S. history.
This is KARE 11 News at 6.
Good evening. Nurses at 14 Twin Cities area hospitals are voting right now on whether to approve a major walkout.
The vote is expected to go well into the night. At issue are pension benefits, staffing levels, and patient care. KARE 11's John Croman is live in St. Paul with the latest. John?
And guys, we've been seeing nurses rolling in through the doors of the River Center and the Roy Wilkins Auditorium here all day. The polls are open until 10 o'clock. They come here knowing full well that the no vote today basically sets the wheels in motion for what, as you said, would be the largest nurses' strike ever in the nation's history.
More nurses on the floor.
So far, they've been informational pickets, all for show, to put pressure on 14 Twin Cities hospitals with contracts in the balance. But the walkout could soon be for real.
We don't want replacement nurses taking care of our patients. We want to get back to the table. We want to come to some solutions on these very important issues for nurses, not just the nurses of today, but for the future.
More than 12,000 members of the Minnesota Nurses Association made their way to the Roy Wilkins Auditorium to vote on the latest contract offer and to vote on proposed cutbacks in the pension plan. The union leaders have advised members to cast a no vote, which will set the stage for a one-day strike as early as June 1st.
When the unions talk about a one-day walkout, first of all, it's disruptive to patient care. And the union leadership says, well, we're going to send a message to the hospitals. What message does it send to us?
The message from nurses is that they want more say over staffing levels. They want more RNs scheduled per shift, saying that in the long run it will lead to better, less expensive care.
But if you have the expertise and the trained people that can do the kind of care that people deserve, then those won't be issues. Length of stays in the hospitals will be shorter, so you will actually save money in the long run.
The union says we want to have this national standard for nurse staffing ratios. Well, the Twin Cities hospitals are already doing better than that. So why do we want to go back to a national standard that we're already better at doing?
Now, the average union nurse in the Twin Cities earns $38 an hour. Most of them, 90% of them, work part-time, and those part-timers, most of those part-timers still qualify for full-time benefits. The hospitals are offering a 0%, 1%, and 2% raise over the term of this 3-year contract. But nurses have said that money is not the big issue this year. They're focusing on those other things we've been talking about, such as the staffing levels and the cutbacks in pensions. Again, the polls are open until 10 tonight. We'll have a full report on KARE 11 at 10, as well as on the web on KARE11.com. Back to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. And a vote that could affect thousands of patients.
This is KARE 11 News at 10.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Twin Cities nurses have been casting ballots all day, voting on whether to strike.
At issue, pension benefits and staffing levels. If the nurses vote to strike, it could happen as soon as June 1st.
The voting just wrapped up. Let's go now to KARE 11's Boyd Hoopert, who's live at the St. Paul River Center. Boyd?
Well, Julie and Mike, the votes have been counted. The nurses are rallying. They have voted to reject the contracts, the wage and benefit contracts offered by the hospitals. More than 9,000 nurses voted today, 9,000 of the 12,000 who were eligible to vote. The margin was wide. More than 90% voted to reject, in effect authorizing a planned one-day strike. The soonest that strike could take place is June 1st.
Up all night, vote all day.
A vote by the nurses to reject a wage and benefit offer is a stage setter for a planned one-day strike by 12,000 union nurses at 14 Twin Cities hospitals.
And usually not real gung-ho on things like this, but you know what? This is something that really stood up and said, you know what? I need to stand up and say something for this.
The union insists it's not about money, though the nurses are asking for a 9% raise over 3 years, while the hospitals are offering a third of that, plus reductions in pension contributions. Yet it's the hospital's demand for flexibility in scheduling that is most contentious. Nurses say they are not widgets that can be moved from one hospital or unit to another, and they're willing to walk over it, at least for one day. In terms of numbers, it would be an even larger walkout than the Twin Cities' last major nurses' strike in 1984, when 6,000 nurses stayed out not for one day, but 38.
And it isn't necessarily because the nurses aren't willing to do an extended strike. That isn't it at all. There's different strategies involved. So we'll just see what happens with this one. Maybe they're testing us.
The hospitals are already making contingency plans, including lining up temporary nurses who may hang around a little longer.
Nurses do have to understand that if they are walking out the door on Monday, it's the hospital then at that point that decides when they return to work.
What does that say about patient safety that they're trying to play this game of chicken with nurses and say, well, we're going to show you?
Well, not much the two sides are agreeing on right now. For the record, the average full-time nurse at those 14 hospitals earns $79,000 a year. The union points out that only about 10% of their nurses are full-time, and of course the part-timers earn less. So what happens next? Well, now the union will meet to decide what day it wants to conduct that one-day strike. It then must notify the hospitals, give them a 10-day notice of their intention to strike. So that's where things go from here. But again, tonight, the vote overwhelming. The nurses have voted to strike.
All right. Thank you, Boyd.